There are a lot of heroes in Marvel Rivals that can be very difficult to beat when used properly. And there's even more characters that could shut down the heroes that you main and make it difficult for you to get value. That's why in this video, we're gonna give you our brand new updated counters list, going over every single hero, talk about their strengths, weaknesses, ways to counter them, and characters that are extremely good against them. Now, if you enjoy the content, make sure you smash that subscribe, and let's get into the video. Today's video is powered by G Fuel, the ultimate fuel for Fear Fest. Whether you're grinding through horror games, pulling late night streams, or just trying to survive those jump scares, G Fuel got your back. No sugar, no crash, just clean, long-lasting energy that keeps you sharp when things get spooky. Now on the G Fuel website, their horror collection has tons of horror-themed G Fuel flavors and collector's mugs that you're not gonna wanna miss out on while they are on sale. Definitely check it out right now and save some money using my code in the links down below for a killer discount. And once again, thank you G Fuel for sponsoring this video. First hero, the Thing. Now the primary use for the Thing right now is specifically against dive. And specifically against not every kind of dive, but Black Panther, Captain America, Venom, the Thing does get quite a bit of value by preventing these characters from being able to run away or use their mobility. And if you combine that with other forms of CC, the Thing can be really good. He's also really good at characters that try to displace him, but he does sometimes lose in the brawl mirror to characters that have displacement tools like Wolverine, but he just can't trade damage favorably up against the Wolverine in an isolation. But if you go up against a really particularly great Thing, what do you do to stop him? Well, his hardest counter is undoubtedly Groot. Cutting off his line of sight to run away, basically he comes into your team and then you just wall him off so he can't jump back to his team, is gonna get him killed very easily. It's probably his hardest counter and just completely shuts him down. And in addition to that, super high damage characters that could do damage to him outside of his effective range, which means characters like Punisher and Squirrel Girl absolutely shred a Thing over and over again. You gotta understand that if you have a comp that doesn't have enough damage, you could all be calling focus the Thing, but if you don't have enough raw damage in that comp, you're never gonna be able to kill him. But add one source of high damage and all of a sudden you could easily burst through the Thing. I said that this character is fairly polarizing because if you're playing against him like as Black Panther, the best you can do is avoid him when he's cycling into your team, when he's not ready for you to be in their backline and you're trying to basically get the value in dip before he shows up. But the reality is this is a character far easier to just swap to something hyper effective against him, or rather just swap off of things that he's really good at shutting down, and you could easily make the Thing swap. Now next is Captain America, a character that is super highly mobile and highly survivable, and that's his biggest strength, especially on payload maps. He can stall objectives for a very long time. So what do you do to shut down a Captain America? The first thing is peeling, and I know that this is a really profound concept for a lot of players, but if your support is pushing the cart by themselves and there's a cap stalling it at close to full HP, that support will never be able to get the cap off the cart. They could shoot at that person, they could constantly fight them, but if you are unwilling to come back and help that support clear the cap off the cart, the cap will always be there and constantly delaying the cart. So it doesn't really matter what you're accomplishing. Making sure that you're coming back, forcing the cap off, and then being ready for him to dip out, grab a health pack, and then come back in is extremely important to stop a cap from getting free value, just delaying the cart. Now, Cap also has some vulnerability, really high amounts of burst damage, like a Punisher shotgun, or large amounts of crowd control, like Bucky's hook, or a combination of Bucky plus Emma plus mass amounts of crowd control is extremely good. And if you're a support player, you should look to combine your pieces of crowd control right after your teammates use it. So the Emma grabs him, kicks him into a wall, you freeze him right after. The Bucky hooks him in, then uppercuts him, then you freeze him. You're kind of combining and chaining, or trying to set up situations where the cap is in a permanent state of not being able to play the game, and you don't want to just throw it and waste it. You want to save it for these kind of optimal times. Cap also has no way to interact with characters like Ultron, really little ways to interact with characters like Rocket and Jeff that can play verticality, and yeah, all around peeling is just OP against Cap, which is one of the reasons why he's so good and ranked, because players just don't peel. But if you are gonna peel, like as anyone, you can shut down a Cap a lot. Now, the next thing we got to talk about is Peni, a character that has one of the highest win rates in the game when used in her specific spots. And this is typically defense, first points, or choke points, where she teams up with a rocket and she just covers the point in all kinds of nests and traps where players are always getting caught out and killed by them. And the thing about Peni that is very difficult to deal with is you could get a pick, like you could kill one of their supports and you could think, okay, everyone press W, but then on the way in, people die to the Peni. People get slow, people get split, people just explode, and it's a character that you have to do your due diligence, so to speak, which is take the time to do things slow and methodically before you just rush in. This means taking the time to go on a flank, waste 10 seconds to break the generator, break any mines or traps that you see, set it up so that you deny that value before you push forward, because you have to think about all of her utility as like an extension of her herself. She is not the only threat. Everything around her is also part of the value that she creates. So you need to deal with this. And if you do deal with it, she becomes like 30, 40, 50% less effective. So it's worth doing. And it's almost like you're killing her partially. Now you're not in a 6v6 anymore. You're in a 6v5.3 or 5.5 or whatever. You have an advantage just by killing her pieces of utility. Now, not every character is going to have the ability to do that, and that's why I think against Peni, swapping to characters that have a means to shoot at Peni generators or setups, or easily take an angle, so like something with mobility, right, like a Starlord or a Psylocke, so that you can shoot it, that's really important to do. And if you're just playing something that has no way to break it, and you're running it over and over again, and you're yelling at your team, hey, we should break it, and you're not doing it, you're just gonna lose that game, and it's your fault. Now, something also important to do is when you see nets that obviously probably have traps in them, especially as a tank player, you should be jiggling in and out of them to activate the mines and let them pop, but then not take any damage, right? You're trying to clear the way, because you don't do this and you walk forward and you're like, oh, we got to pick, and then your Luna just gets blown up. So very, very important. It's kind of like Peni is an all hands on deck type of thing, and it's one of the reasons why Peni gets so much value in ranked, because no one wants to help each other. No one wants to do anything selfless. Everyone wants to do things that is only about them, and they want other people to do things for them, or do the hard stuff, the annoying stuff, the shooting the Loki totems, or shooting the Ankh, or shooting the generator. Like, no one wants to do those things, but that's how you beat a Peni. Like, that's the way to beat them, and no one's doing that. So yeah. Now, to simplify it, long distance spam, really good against Peni. Characters like Moon Knight, characters like Squirrel Girl, characters like Ironman. Also, just poke characters in general. So characters that can do damage from range. Magneto is a great tank up against Peni. And just tanks that don't have to walk into the Peni traps and areas in order to break them is generally a good thing. Now, the next character is Thor. And while you won't see one every day, when someone really knows what they're doing on Thor, it feels like they are just solo carrying the entire team, their entire lobby, because they're just having crazy high impact, high damage, high kills, high limbs. They feel like they're everywhere. So what can you do to shut down a Thor? What is his major weaknesses? Now, Thor's big thing is he has a survivability problem. He really struggles when he needs to hold open space, because he could just get bursted down, and he could get caught out and killed out of nowhere with nothing to protect himself like other characters like Mag and Emma have. So this means that crowd control, of course, is going to be great against him. Characters like Bucky, Emma, combinations of crowd control, waiting for him to be in a vulnerable position before you use like your pullback on Invis or your freeze on Luna. You're not just randomly hitting him with these abilities. You're looking for a time when he's expecting to be able to get away and getting hit by multiple. Because I'll say, like, as a Thor, I get hit by one Bucky hook, I'm not dead. I can get out. But if I get hit by a Bucky hook into a freaking Luna freeze and then Emma grabs me, like, I'm dead. Okay, I'm freaking dead. Another thing you have to be careful of about Thor is that he's always looking to drop behind frontline tanks and boop those tanks back into his team. If you're a DPS or a support, calling this and trying to stop this or interact with this is going to be good. And as a tank, you have to be really aware of this, because there's so many free kills Thors get that even work against high elo players, by the way, where the tank walks forward slightly and then they get pushed a little bit too far out of position by the Thor, and between the Thor booping them towards the team, to the bubble slow, the damage, Thor brawling, it's just too much to overcome. The last piece of advice I'll give you against Thor is try not to ego a Thor. Like, there's so many divers, and I'll say this even in high elo games, that think they can 1v1 a Thor. You can't 1v1 a Thor on any character. There's a lot of situations where Thor is trying to isolate you, trying to get you to commit to him so that he can turn the tables on you. Make it so that you're always trying to fight him in a 2v1, not in an isolation. He is the literal god of isolated duels. Now, the next character is Angela, and this is a character that can be super frustrating to play against on certain maps, right? Where she's gonna pull you off, she's gonna push you off. The first tip I'll give you, one of the best tips you could use to counter a freaking Angela, is ask for someone to swap to Rocket in the starting menu or whatever, and get them to drop the jump packs. And this is the one that everyone typically gets for Wolverine, right? Where you can just grab someone and take them all the way back to spawn. Get this on Groot, get this on Magneto, get this as a support. I don't care who you are, grab this, because when that Angela comes and scoops you off the map, and don't make it easy on her, make her do it, make her set it up, make her do all this. She's kind of risking her life or all of her value or all this downtime to try to scoop you off the map, and you just fly back up. You fly back up, and then you float back down to ground, and she didn't get the value. That's the first thing I'll tell you. It's super, super strong, even against Spider-Man and Wolverines and other characters like that. The other thing is play the opposite side of areas with a pit. I know this seems kind of like, oh, duh, Mills, you got to do this. But so many people want to fight, like on the Hydra map with the pit. They want to fight mid or left side when you should be fighting right. And I understand it feels awkward to fight there, but it's way better than fighting in an area where the Angela is effective. You gotta understand that she has downtime issues. So the longer she goes without getting value, then the less and less her character is worth. So take the extra steps to position more favorably in order to not get boofed off the map. Now, another thing is characters that are less susceptible to being displaced are going to be stronger up against Angela. So characters like Thor, characters like Hulk even, characters with mobility are not going to get, you know, as destroyed by an Angela. If you take a Punisher out of position, that can be really bad for the Punisher. You take a Psylocke out of position, not as big of a deal because she can get back to a strong position very quickly. Now, also, characters that are really good directly against Angela or anything that has grounding abilities, I think is extremely good. Of course, Thing is fantastic. One of his best matchups is against Angela, but also characters like Bucky with his cone ground and his uppercut that he can hit. Also, characters like Thor with his E ground or his bubble ground where you can ground people and then brawl the Angela out. And a lot of characters that are good against the field can feel really weak against an Angela. Someone like Magneto can be an absolute Angela victim because he's constantly being swooped into the enemy team, and a good Angela will wait until he doesn't have bubble and he's low cooldown. She'll swoop and grab him, and he'll just die over and over again. And you're like, Magneto's supposed to be good against everything. He's really not up against a great Angela. Next character is Hulk, and while Hulk isn't dominating the meta right now, he can be absolute dominant in the hands of someone that really knows what they're doing. Now, the thing about Hulk is he can kind of feel like he's everywhere. He's on the flank, he's on an off angle, he's diving your back line, and he can basically mitigate or double down on any sort of play that is being made on the battlefield, which is really strong when played perfectly. Now, Hulk does have a lot of things that can kind of annoy him, but there are counterplays against almost everything with Hulk. But a list of characters that do give him problems. Characters like Punisher with lots of burst damage, shotgun damage that can burst him up close, long distance damage because Hulk doesn't have a consistent way to protect himself. He just has a bubble that he can apply, but not like a shield or anything like that, so he can take constant damage. Massive amounts of crowd control can be really difficult. Once again, any mobility heavy tank is going to have this problem where lots of crowd control really messes you up. So the usuals, Emma, Bucky, Luna, Freeze, whatever. But I don't necessarily think you need to play characters that shut Hulk down. You just need to not play characters that Hulk can farm. And here's who Hulk is really great against: divers, flyers, and isolated players. If you're flying, whether you're Ultron, Human Torch, Iron Man, he's gonna jump you out of the sky. A good Hulk will ground you over and over again throughout the course of a game. If you are a diver, a Hulk can peel, exile you, and basically just get you out of position. Whether you're a BP or a Venom or whatever, Hulk has a lot of game at stopping you, peeling, interacting with you, even chasing you after you think you have left the fight. Hulk is good at all these things. Now, next up on the list is Groot, and Groot has a lot of strengths. He is one of the best characters against triple support. He has a very powerful ultimate that generates very quickly, and he has abilities that can go above and over with walls to cut people out of position and things like that. So Groot's strong against some of the traditional picks, characters like Magneto. He even has good game, in my opinion, against characters like Emma, as long as you avoid her grab, and just a lot of raw power in his kit. But for that raw power, he has a lot of weaknesses. Of course, the biggest one is Wolverine, a character that's hardly banned right now, and a character that if you grab the Groot and you get the jump pack with Rocket, you kill him. You just take him off the map. And I think swapping quickly against a Groot, not waiting 5, 6, 7 fights to force him off, can be a good thing if the Groot's really good. Because think about it this way. Let's say you lose the first fight as like whatever you're playing, some random thing, and then if you swap to Wolverine right away, you don't wait, then going into that second fight, you can hit that Groot, mess up his ultimate, and then the Groot's in a weird situation where he has to decide, okay, do I stay Groot to come back and ult, or do I swap now and waste my ult or get rid of it? And those are good, hard decisions that you give your opponent that I think gets you value. Also, just being able to break walls is good. There's a lot of characters that can break walls, whether it's like a Punisher, even Bucky can do it. A lot of characters can break freaking walls, but there's a lot of characters that don't break walls at all, and I would just suggest you don't have to stay away from those characters, but you need at least one wall breaker in your comp, unless your entire comp can go up and over the wall. This is also why characters with mobility are going to be a better hedge up against Groot. So like if you're trying to choose between Magneto and Strange, Strange is a lot better against Groot because he's less likely to get caught out of position and not be able to get out of like a wall maze, while Strange could just fly up. And that's why personally I really like playing Thor up against Groot, because I can boop the Groot out of position, I can fly up over his walls, he's never going to wall me off, and it kind of cuts off a point of his value, or a way that he gets a lot of value against other tanks. Also, characters like Rocket are going to be great against Groot because you could just always get a vantage point angle, and Jeff is pretty good as well because you can help to break the walls and play angles that aren't being cut off by a line of sight, where it's a lot easier to cut off the line of sight of like a Luna or an Invis. Now, it's really important to be thinking about his ultimate because Groot's build it really fast, pretty much on track with your support. So what that means is that when he's close, you should be looking to split, spread, make the ult hard on him. Don't allow him to hit a freaking 6-man. You can easily predict this, and if you set up your positioning in a way that he can only get 1 or 2 people, it makes it far better and less likely for y'all to just get completely wiped with one ult combo. Of course, next is Strange. Doctor Strange is an extremely strong character that has poke and brawl capabilities, but where you can really mess up a Strange really comes down to his shield management. Unlike Magneto, he does have a finite shield, so large amount of focus of the shield, breaking his shield is actually a viable strategy, makes it extremely hard for him to hold space. Also, his ultimate can be really telegraphed, and there's ways to interact with it across a ton of characters. Any hard crowd control will stop the ult. Also, just pushing it away with Invisible Woman's push is also very strong. And I want you to challenge yourself to think about when a Strange is ulted last. If it's 2 fights, he definitely has it. He builds it very quickly. And save your cooldowns, look to stop it, and just try. You're not always going to hit it, but you can't have a chance to stop the ult if you don't try. Also, recognize he's going to be back at 50%, which means he's going to get it really quickly. So yeah, you want to make sure that you stop it, and then you're ready to stop it again when he goes for it a second time. Also, a really important aspect of countering Strange is countering Portal. Think about when your opponent has the Portal in order to touch, and you as an individual and as a team should be pushing up and pressing enemies, trying to stop a Portal from happening. There are a ton of characters that can disable a portal. Spider-Man, Captain America ult, Invisible Push, Luna Freeze, Bucky Hook, the list goes on and on. Now, oftentimes you have to already be positioning very aggressively in order to pull this off, because if you try to do it too late, they'll get the portal off and you could die in the process, or just not be there when your team is trying to fight. Now, we finally arrived at the Ice Queen herself, Emma frickin' Frost. This character can be extremely difficult to deal with because of the threat of her grabbing you, and specifically tanks are the ones that have to be most afraid of her, because she grabs you, pulls you out of position, grabs you through your shield if you're Stranger Mag or whatever the case may be, and you just die. Now, something important, though, is you look and see times where Emma cannot afford to commit to the grab. There's a lot of times where there's a pick on the enemy team, the Emma's low, and you could normally not play in an aggressive position because she could just diamond and grab you. But in this case, if she commits to stunning herself for that long time, because remember, she's not just holding you hostage, she's holding herself hostage in that position. So if it's a position that is compromised, your team is pushing in because you have picks, or she's low, she will just die committing to that grab. And it's important to know when that is true, because sometimes I see players play too scared because they're playing around the Emma when the Emma is not really in a position where she can hold her ground or commit to a grab anyways. Also, calling out diamond used is one of the most important called cooldowns because it dramatically changes how you can play around her. I think characters like Thor can absolutely hard brawl her, but not if she has diamond form. Characters like Strange, same thing. There's a lot of characters that can get all up in her face and brawl the hell out of her, but only when she doesn't have diamond form, and it changes how you can play against her. It also means that as a DPS or support, you can shoot at an Emma and just keep focusing her until she uses diamond and then just move on to a different target. After she uses diamond, you already got a lot of value. You don't have to keep greeting for the kill. You can move on to something else, but you made it so much easier on the rest of your team's lives, especially your mobile or melee characters once that diamond is out. The next tank is Magneto. Magneto is extremely strong and good at many different things. He can poke, he has burst damage, he has crowd control, he has bubbles that can protect him or his teammates, and of course, he has an extremely powerful ultimate that can kill defensive ults. Well, Magneto doesn't have any inherent weaknesses. He is kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none. He makes a good team better, but he can't make a bad team great. So most of the time you're trying to look for value in spite of Magneto, not on him. You're not trying to shut the mag down. You're trying to create more problems than he can solve. Now, knowing when a Magneto is low cooldown is really important. When he uses his shield, when he uses his bubble, these are times where Magneto is at his most vulnerable. So if you're going to hit him with a random freeze, an invis pull, a hook, whatever, you're trying to look for the windows in between his cooldown usage where he cannot defend himself. Now, also, you need to always be thinking about his ultimate if it interacts with you. If you're an Ironman, you cannot ult blindly into his ult. If you're a Jeff, same thing. Cloak, same thing. You need to have a game plan if the Magneto has ult or when he uses it. Like, good Ironmans will 180 so that he can't absorb the ult. Cloaks will ask for bubble or be ready to go around a corner where he can't hit them, and also start on Cloak so you could fade away. I've reviewed hundreds of players, and I will tell you that so many players just don't even think about Magneto ult until they press Q, and a lot of times they don't get punished for it because the Magneto is just not particularly good. But that can't be your game plan forever. It's just to hope your opponent is not particularly good. Now, for matchups, I think that characters that want to commit to a hard brawl can be difficult for Magneto to deal with. Characters like Groot, characters like Angela, characters like Thor. Displacement is really good against them, like Angela. Constant displacement or mass displacement can be very good against him as well. Now, last but certainly not least in the tanking category is Venom, a super strong character right now, but he has tons of vulnerabilities that we could talk about. Let's first talk about Venom's strengths, and his big one up against triple support is the fact that there's not enough damage to clear him out of backlines. I think if you're playing triple support and they're playing a Venom, you're gonna have a really hard time killing that Venom unless you have like Mantis or Mantis Atom or just large amounts of damage replacement, because Venom can just kind of sit there and just never die in your backline, and he will eventually get value if you leave him there long enough. This means that having high burst is important up against Venom, but that's not really enough to kill him, because a good Venom is going to slam in and always have his grapple to get out. So he's gonna have overshield to be really tanky, and then grapple to just get out of the fight very quickly. Once again, mass CC is really important here. So not just one piece of crowd control, but multiple. Hitting Luna Freeze into a hook, into a grab, all of that is really good. Not maybe right off the rip, but after he's kind of extended in the fight for long enough so that he's stuck there and he can't get out. Now, there's a couple of characters that are extremely frustrating for a Venom to play against. I will say that Invisible Woman is one of them, and not to be a reactive Invisible Woman where he slams on you and you push him away right away. You want to be able to use your pull when he tries to get out and pull him back into your team. Because remember, once he uses that grapple, once he commits it, he has no way to get out very reliably and he can die very easily. Jeff can also do this with his right click as well because of the small boop. Characters that I can find particularly annoying at times are characters characters that you can't really interact with. So mobility heavy characters like Psylocke and Starlord that are always shooting at you, playing adjacent angles, never letting you set up, and always chasing you down when you try to get away. Now we can finally move on to the DPS, and the first DPS is going to be Squirrel Girl. Now this is a character in a classification I like to call deal with or defeat. Basically, if these characters are left uninterrupted and they're allowed to just exist for too long, they will constantly get way too much value and you'll lose the game. Other characters that this includes are Moon Knight and many others that basically their power is just them being able to constantly output their primary, their damage, their utility, and you're going to lose because of it. What does this actually mean? You need to deliberately challenge, seek out, and fight the Squirrel Girl. In a 1v1, while she has some tools, she loses to most characters with mobility. So if you want to take a direct duel with her as Thor or Psylocke or Starlord, take an angle on her as a character like Hela. But the most important thing is just to not let her just exist. In a game where neither DPS are challenging each other, the Squirrel Girl is always going to win. And if you're a support, it doesn't matter how much healing you do if there's a Squirrel Girl that's alive constantly pumping out more damage than you can keep up with. Now, getting on top of little pieces of cover is also really strong. Like against her ultimate, it can't kill you if you're on top of the cart or different places like that. So keep that in mind positionally when the Squirrel Girl is close to an ultimate. The next on the list is going to be Scarlet Witch, a character that can be frustrating to play against, but suffers against quite a few characters. The main reason that she gets so much value, especially in the lower ranks, is because she doesn't have a steep aim requirement to get her value. But she does have a ton of weaknesses against many top tier characters in the game. Characters like Bucky can easily hook her out of her ultimate, shoot her, catch her out of position. Hela's Jeans, same thing. Psylocke can chase her down. Basically, her best matchup is gonna be against divers, where they don't have direct ways to look at her and deal damage to her when she's in open space. So, you know, she can just follow you around when you're Black Panther or whatever and just slowly kill you. So those characters are not ones I would recommend. The only other thing I would say is that if a Scarlet Witch pops her ultimate in a random position, you have to be ready for the strange portal that's gonna pop up because they try to hide the sound or they try to put the Scarlet Witch ult in a place that you don't expect, and then the portal kind of brings it to you. So just look out for that and you should be good. Now for Spider-Man, this character has high mobility and can pull you off the map. He can be very strong in certain areas where he's constantly threatening lethality against tanks, pulling you off. And in a similar way that I talked about the Angela trick where you're gonna grab the bounce pads or the jump packs from Rocket, still really good up against Spider-Man, and also characters that can't get pulled off the map are gonna be nice as well. Now, when it comes to Spider-Man, he's going to super struggle against triple support. Like, he can't do really anything against triple support Ultron. That's one of the best comps you could play against a Spider-Man because the Ultron can not only neutralize his combos, but also shoot him on his way in or out. Characters that are hit scan, like Hela, do actually have favorable matchups up against Spider-Man past a certain skill point because when Spider-Man's flying through the air or when he's trying to fly to retreat, Hela's can just dink him out of the sky. So that's going to kind of be a skill check. So whether you counter him or not is depending on your personal skill. But I do think that the most important thing you need to look out for is Spider-Man's ultimate. If he's cycled in twice without using it, then he most likely has it, and the ultimate can be canceled by freeze, can be pushed away by invis, can be hooked by Bucky. There's a lot of ways to interact with it favorably. You just have to be ready for it, because if you get caught off guard by the ultimate, that's how it can get a 2, 3, 4K, and that's the situation where you really start to lose against Spider-Man a lot. So tracking that is extremely important. Now, of course, there's a lot of characters that are reasonably good up against Spider-Man. The easy ones are ones that give you more time to interact with the Spider-Man. Characters like Bucky, of course, Namor, that has auto-tracking squids, and basically any character that he can't instantly kill you out of nowhere, those are all going to be good against Spider-Man. Now, the next character is Hawkeye, and Hawkeye is one of those characters that, once again, needs to be dealt with or you lose the game. Like, every second Hawkeye gets line of sight on players, it's kind of like a rolling of the dice to maybe get a kill or not, right? He's not going to get a kill every single time, but the better the Hawkeye, the better the odds, and if he's uncontested, He will eventually kill your supports, kill your deeps, and then just win the fight by himself. So he's a character that needs to be pressed and actively killed no matter who you are. If you're a DPS, you need to be trying to eliminate the Hawkeye first. He has to put himself in a more compromised position because he has to play close enough. So taking an angle, not allowing him to look at your team and you at the same time, and trying to kill him is really important, and Dive is going to be great at that. You know, characters that jump on top of him, like Venom, Cap, characters that want to dive him, even characters like Black Panther, Psy, all going to be really, really good against a Hawkeye. And he's going to be best against characters that want to try to trade damage with him from range. Characters like Punisher, he's going to farm. Characters like Hela, he does have an advantage in that matchup. So that's just some of the stuff to consider. Now, tanks are going to have the easiest job to zone away a Hawkeye, especially if you're like a mag. You want to poke him and push him away from your team, off the high ground, out of the line of sight of your supports. That's really important. And one of the most important things you can do is if your support pops their ult, especially your Cloak and Dagger, it's your job to all-in W key the Hawkeye. Like, you're using or leveraging that ultimate and just the overall pressure your team is creating to instantly and immediately put that Hawkeye in a get out or die situation, because otherwise, if the Hawkeye just gets to stand there, he's going to kill your supports through their ultimate. You're going to lose the fight. And it's going to be your fault because you didn't immediately press him. So that's something super important as well. Now, of course, we got to talk about Black Panther, a character that I think some players still struggle with. So let's talk about the ways to shut him down. Black Panther really thrives in hit and run situations where he can get a ton of value and dip out. So characters that allow you to sustain or weather the storm are going to be good. You know, characters like Adam Soulbond in triple support, characters like Loki in triple support as well, being able to totem and kind of weather the storm. And then Ultron, of course, is like the best triple support character against Panther. But let's say you don't want to play triple support, marking him or tracking him and following him around, preventing his setups and trying to chase him down in post setup dives are going to be good. This includes characters like Daredevil and also characters like Psylocke. And then if you just want to go the stun route or the character that just gets to interact with them favorably route, you can also go characters like Bucky. Of course, he's going to be good against every dive. Also, characters like Mr. Fantastic or Namor. Characters that can't get blitzed out of nowhere or have means to deal damage with Panther or burst him when he gets into the fight are all going to be good as well. Now, if you're a support and you want to be able to beat Black Panther consistently, a lot of it is going to be a mechanical skill check. There are windows of time where Black Panther is vulnerable post dashes, during his spin kick, or during his ultimate when he activates it. Those are moments where he can get slept by Mantis or Luna, and if you can hit those, you can easily beat a Black Panther, and if you miss those, you're gonna die. Now, I'm not saying that you have to hit them every single time. I don't expect that of you, but I will say that if you're going to stay a character like Mantis, like Luna, and you can't even track the Black Panther, you're going to put yourself in a huge disadvantage, and it would be better for you to be on something like Rocket or Cloak or something else that is not going to just be a BP victim. Now, the next DPS is Storm, a character that I think is fairly easy for a lot of players to interact with. She doesn't move particularly fast, so you just take an off angle on her with a hit scan character. You can ground her with a character like Thor, or you can fly at her with Angela, or you can even take an off angle and shoot her with Psy. Every single character can pretty much interact with Storm. She doesn't fly too high. She typically flies fairly low to the ground, and she doesn't move fast. But the main thing that people want to learn how to deal with is the Jeff Storm combo. The first thing is make sure that you're positioned in a place that you can take the high ground out of nowhere, because if there's not a ramp or steps for the Storm ult to take with Jeff, she cannot climb it. So that's the first thing. The next thing is just have something in your kit to bust or break the Storm ult. So Ironman ult, Punisher ult, if you combo like Bucky ult with some other stuff can be good. High damage is going to be able to kill the Storm Jeff ult, so you can kill them both and trade, you know, their 2 ults for your 1 plus kill them. That being said, I would say that you should expect a little bit more burst damage in open space when you're playing against a Storm. Now for Ironman's a character that, of course, you're going to need to be able to directly deal with him. Depending on the rank you're at, a lot of players will not look up, so that pretty much makes it your job. So I would say characters that have the capability to shoot him, so, you know, Punishers, burst damage is great, Helas, Black Widows, These are all good. Supports that have the ability to shoot him. So like Adam, Ultron is great against Iron Man. Luna is actually fairly good because she has hit, scan, fire. Those are all going to be very good against him. And even characters that ground, you know, or fly. So once again, Thor, Angela, going to be pretty good against Iron Man. Magneto is going to be one of the best characters against Iron Man because you could just eat his ultimate and then chuck it at one of his supports and just kill them because it's going to be fully charged. You can do some crazy stuff like eat an Iron Man ult, kill a Luna ult, and it's really, really strong. But I will say that it's everyone's job to track the position of the Iron Man, especially when you know he has ult. Keep in mind he's going to try to slip behind you or to the side of you and pop his ultimate. But you can interact with that with a lot of characters. You can shoot him and kill him. You can stun him with Luna Freeze. Lots of ways to interact. You just can't lose sight of him, and you can't waste your cooldowns when you're going to need it to deny that ult. Now, the next DPS is Black Widow, a character that most of the time is not going to feel that dominant, but on certain maps, especially with the Mantis boost pocket against an amazing Widow, the character feels very difficult to deal with. Great kick, stun that is almost impossible to avoid, so she can stun like Venoms before they exit and really just burst any melee character. It can be frustrating. And then long distance, she dominates there as well. The real trick to beating a Black Widow is trying to look for windows where you can play this kind of middle ground and then burst her before she has a chance to kick you. Like, playing up close, just trying to duel her up close is bad. Trying to duel her from distance is bad. But playing a middle ground where you're like very quickly bursting her down, closing the gap only when you can kill her before she commits the kick, that's going to be really, really good. Also, a lot of Black Widows will sometimes whiff the kick if you try to intentionally bait it out, so that's something also to look out for. I do think that the best characters up against Black Widow are characters that can constantly pressure her from multiple angles, so characters like Psylocke and Starlord are pretty good against Black Widow because you can play outside of her kick range, but still close enough where you're more lethal than she is. Now, Mr. Fent is the next hero we got to talk about, and this character is mainly just going to be a strong anti-dive threat. So if you're playing hard dive up against him, he's a little difficult because you can't dive him because you just never can kill him. And if you dive his teammates, he can interrupt that. Now, some of the brawl dive hybrids can actually brawl him into fantastic if you're put into a situation where you can take a true 1v1 with him. So like Daredevil and Magik can technically beat him in an isolated duel, but the second you try to go their back line and then Mr. Fent turns it into a 2v1, you're gonna lose that. So you just gotta be extra careful with how you're engaging around him and really try to track his cooldowns, knowing when he's about to go big mode, inflation mode, when he has his Dorito where he can't take damage. This is important because those cycles between his abilities is when he's most vulnerable. So you kind of got to know his cycles or learn his cycles if you want to really shut him down. And I think the best players that can play against Mr. Fantastic are players that have actually put a little bit of time into the hero. This is probably true for every hero on this list, but I think it's really true for very cooldown oriented characters like Mr. Fent. Now, next is Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight is a really, really strong character when he's left alone. So he's very similar to like Hawkeye and Squirrel Girl. Once again, deal with them or defeat, where if you do not deal with the Moon Knight, he's going to farm your entire team. And most of the time, it's not a support's job to deal with it. It's a DPS or tank's job to actively push the Moon Knight. Not allow the Moon Knight to set up. Not allow the Moon Knight to take high ground. Fight the Moon Knight. And he does have tools to win fights with you. You still want to get the jump on him because in general, Moon Knight wins most engagements where he gets the jump on the opponents. You still have to create a certain amount of element of surprise against the Moon Knight because if he gets to onk you and right-click you before you even, use an ability, then you have to use all your abilities defensively to run away, and then you're not going to kill him, right? You're running and resetting. So trying to find him, track him, and look for moments where he's trying to change his position, going from the low ground to the high ground, and just being patient, setting up at the high ground, maybe cutting noise, thinking about where the Moon Knight is going to position next, and then catch him during his transitionary phase before he sets up, because when he's not ready to fight somebody, when he can't challenge you on his terms, he's going to lose that duel the majority of the time. Now, of course, the characters that are going to be able to shut down these characters the best are characters that get to perfectly set up their engagements at all times from any direction. Case in point, like the Starlords and the Psylocke, of course. But, long distance damage deals are good. I think divers can be reasonable. Flyers are going to be good because Moon Knight can't contest test them. And then, you know, anything that is going to just directly challenge the Moon Knight, always going to be good. So the Thors, the Caps, the Venoms, all of this could be reasonably good. Although sometimes Moon Knight can mess up your exits on Venom, so be careful of that. Now, the next character is gonna be Blade. Blade is another character that's fairly cooldown oriented. He has his block, and that's a really important cooldown because until he uses it, trying to force hard CC on him is going to be a liability, like committing to a, you know, thing ult onto him, or trying to ult him as Thor, or even trying to necessarily like hit a grapple on him. Unless it has an element of surprise to it, it's going to be hard. So you want to kind of bait that first, and then he's going to be vulnerable for a window of time. I will say the thing you have to be most afraid of, though, is one, him building up high charge, constantly brawling, constantly generating a lot. So if you're a tank, you don't really want to take any true isolations with Blade because he can build that up off of you and then kill your teammates. And if you're a DPS, you want to look for times to punish him when he's trying to brawl into your tanks, and supports as well, trying to freeze him when he's trying to get high charge, trying to get that person off your tanks is going to be really important because, once again, Blade is a character that will farm tanks the most, and if your tank dies, you're going to die soon after that. So you just kind of got to look out for that. Now, as far as his ultimate is concerned, you just need to get out of his slash line as quickly as possible because you'll just die if you stay in it for too long. And also, if Blade dips into your team and through your team, if you can get out and then immediately peel to kill him afterwards, that could be something strong as well. Now, of course, we got to talk about Iron Fist, which is a character that is actually seeing quite a bit of play right now and is really strong. He does put pressure on the back line, pivots to the front line, and he can brawl in isolation, both tanks and supports, so you got to be a little bit careful about him. He's a character where patience is the most important thing. Like, if you're in a 1v1 with him as Luna, he will not be doing a ton of damage to you until he uses his block, because that's when he's going to start brawling a lot more and doing a lot more damage. And if you don't freeze him, then you can outplay him, and he typically has to dip out. But if you waste freeze and he blocks it, you lose the fight. So being patient is important. Like, he can engage onto you, you can pop your clap, and then you want to force him to block, and then you can try to outplay him with freeze. But if you do it in the reverse order, you know, you panic, you try to freeze him, he blocks it, he's gonna kill you, you're dead, you're dead. So he's just like a character that you make a mistake into him, you will lose. But if you don't, you can beat him. You can consistently beat him. Now, besides being patient and really tracking his block cooldown, it's also important that if Iron Fist is ever on someone else, you're trying to help them. Whether that means heal that person, whether that means just try to boop Iron Fist or shoot him when you know he doesn't have block. This is important because, of course, Iron Fist can only see one person and he can't always see behind him. So he's hyper-focused on winning a 1v1 or blocking, you know, the Luna freeze. He's going to be more susceptible to the random Bucky hook or the random Emma grab or the Thor pinning him back to your team. So look for those moments to where you can actually help your team. But if you give the Iron Fist max health because you didn't really know he had a block or not, that can really just kill your team too. So you got to be careful of that. And then, of course, Iron Fist is going to be vulnerable during his fight exits. So if you're a character that has mobility to chase him down like Psylocke or a tank with mobility, you can not allow him to reset up. Now, Punisher is a character that can be extremely powerful when properly enabled by his team. He's like a character that, if properly enabled, he can be your team's win condition because his ultimate does so much raw damage. It can kill through defensive ults. In addition to that, he just outputs consistent raw damage as well, and his shotgun is very lethal from close range. The first thing that you need to do in order to stop a Punisher is make sure that in your composition you have ways to destroy his turret. And a lot of characters can do this from every role, but DPS and supports are going to be able to do this the easiest. You have to destroy or get him off his turrets, not allow him to farm a lot of free ult charge off of it. If a Punisher builds up ultimate too quickly, he's going to off-pace your Magneto when he tries to counter him with his ult. So that's going to be something very important. Now, of course, dive characters are going to be rather good up against Punisher. Characters like Daredevil, characters like Psylocke, being able to attack him from certain angles and do a hit and run on him. He's rather big in his hitbox, so he's easy to burst down because he still is a squishy. And then the, of course, hardest thing about Punisher is his ultimate. How do you deal with that? Now, it's going to really depend on the situation. I think there's going to be some times where you can just shoot him, burst him down with long distance poke, whether that's Hela, Hawkeye, whoever, and that can do the job. There are are going to be other times where you can back away from it and kite away and run away from the Punisher ult, but there's a lot of cases where you need to face it directly. And what do? Well, if you have a Magneto ult, that's a really great way to stop it, but it kind of depends on when their Magneto, you know, bubbles, protects, shields, and the trick that you always need is more time. Try not to challenge it right away, but rather give up as much space as possible before you try to challenge it. You know, use your shield, use your bubble, back up. Maybe they blow their cooldowns too early to try to protect him, and then they have nothing to actually protect him when you do pop your ultimate. Or maybe they think you don't have your ultimate when you really do, and you try to Magneto ult and turn the tables on him. Now, it can be really difficult if there's like a combo of ultimates, you know, Luna, Punisher, stuff like that. Now, oftentimes you just really want to back away from the fight as much as possible and then ult in response or ult after the fact in order to potentially try and turn the fight, but only towards the end. And that's specifically when you're not up against Rocket Punisher, which I think is the one that can kill through defensive ults the easiest. Now, last tip for you was just to make sure to respect Punisher's burst damage with his shotgun. That's an insane amount of damage that he can pump you all at once, over 300 damage with just a single shot. So you have to be very careful with it, especially if you get like frozen by Luna into a shotgun blast. You could die out of nowhere, whether you're Thor, Venom, whoever. So just respect it more. And if you engage on top of a Punisher, you pretty much have like a very small window to kill him immediately. Once he whips out that shotgun, you typically need to run away if he's not gonna die before he gets to use the second shot. Now, the new kid on the block, Diddy himself, Daredevil, is definitely terrorizing backlines right now. So what is the best way to deal with Daredevil? The first thing I need to tell you is that Daredevil is the GOAT at 1v1s. He is probably one of the best 1v1 characters in the entire game. So don't challenge him in a 1v1 unless you know he has nothing and you're very confident that you can kill him instantly, because otherwise he's going to turn the tables on you. So many players want to push the Daredevil, challenge the Daredevil, fight the Daredevil, and they die out of nowhere. Daredevil's big weakness is that he is a little bit isolationist in the way that he fights. So, you know, once he uses that deflect or reflect, now he's vulnerable. So that's what you really have to do. You have to try to bait out that cooldown and then punish him afterwards, but try not to round corners or chase him. Play an open space where everyone can fight him. He's kind of like an all hands on deck character, and it's one of the reasons why he's so strong the lower in elo you go, because no one really helps each other. Now, as long as you make sure to not outplay yourself into his reflect, I think a lot of characters with, you know, team pressure and presence, as long as you're playing reasonably with your team, you can take down a Daredevil unless he plays perfectly. So just make sure that you are playing discipline against him. You don't use a powerful piece of CC cooldown into him until you get confirmation he uses that ability. And when he uses it, you should calm it to your team. It's really important, like a very important cooldown to calm. Now, we do got to mention Human Torch. She is not performing that well right now in this meta, but Human Torch is still a difficult character to deal with depending on the situation. Right now, if you have high burst damage, you're going to be able to contest Torch best. So characters like Hela are going to be good. Also, if he doesn't have like an Ultron pocket, characters like Spiderman, surprisingly good against Torch because you could get him mid-air. And once again, I do think that Thor and Angela are very, very good at contesting flyers. Also, in a weird way, I do think that Bucky is actually one of the best characters up against Torch, because while he doesn't have the burst damage to shoot him out of the air necessarily, because it is a projectile that isn't going to be as precise as like a Hela shot, he can ground the Torch with his cone, and that is going to allow your teammates to kind of interact with him. But also recognize that Torch gets a lot of value because of mass AoE healing, so triple support is going to be fairly good against him. If you can't directly deal with him, then being able to sustain through him with a lot of healing, AoE healing, is also going to be particularly strong. That's kind of like a worst case situation. If you just don't have any good hit scan players on your team or no one that can contest him directly, then it's better to probably just play triple. And then like Ultron and Adam can actually shoot him reasonably well. I think Ultron's very good against him. So yeah, some characters to think about. Now for Namor is going to be really strong, especially when he has that Hela team up because he has that anti. How do you deal with Namor? You have to force him out of positions that he wants to be in. You just gotta kind of predict his cycles and force him to use his bubble. If he uses his bubble to get out and then he goes back to his team, fine, you got your value. You forced him out of your backline. You forced him away. But if he uses his bubble and then stays in, you typically want to press him and punish him after the fact. Something about Namor is that a lot of times, if you're not playing dive and the Namor isn't playing anti-dive, he's going to constantly just be flanking your supports, looking to double squid, and then, you know, use the team up to try to kill your supports. You have to interrupt that because it's really hard for supports to do it. It's hard for supports to deal with the squids and the team up and the Namor. It's just like too much to deal with. So if you're a DPS, you need to find a way to peel that person off, force their bubble to get them out of the back line. If you're a tank, you need to do the same thing. So tanks that have a means to directly challenge him are going to be good. Like, I think Magneto can have a little bit of a hard time doing it, and like more orthodox tanks do, but tanks with mobility can challenge him. So, you know, tanks like Hulk, I think, can challenge him directly. Thor can challenge him directly. Even Strange with his flight can challenge him. So you just want to get him out of your back line. His squids do very little to tanks, and there's a lot of DPS that don't care about them as much as long as they're not the primary target. Like, as long as you're not getting hit by him with the element of surprise. And I think Namor's play off the element of surprise a lot, so that's really what you're like, trying to just interrupt that cycle, and then he's just not going to be that valuable or not that impactful. I also do think that any character that has the means to destroy squids really easily are going to be good. There's a lot of characters that can do that, even supports that can do that. So yeah, just making sure that you're constantly shooting it, whether you're freaking Luna, whether you're Psylocke, whoever you are, try to shoot these squids. Don't allow them to just stick around for no reason. But the next DPS we have to talk about is Pheonix, a character that no longer has her melee tech, so she's less powerful, but she still is really strong, with a really good ultimate that can be comboed with and a lot of sustain. So how do you deal with Pheonix? The first thing is you got to recognize that the first engagement on top of her, she's going to typically teleport away, but after that, she could be a bit vulnerable. So she could teleport out, but once she uses that, then you could like all in commit to a dive to her. You could try to just jump on her as BP or whoever you are, but until she uses that teleport, she can just really use it like offensively and defensively. You really want to force a defensive use out of that teleport if you can. Another thing is when she pops her ultimate, you need to kind of identify whether or not it's shootable, and in most cases it is. It's possible to shoot and destroy as long as you're doing it with your whole team. Or, you know, if you're a DPS, you can actually do it yourself depending on who you are. Punishers, Buckies, characters with high burst. But if you're a support, you should also be trying to shoot it. In a lot of cases, you can help a lot. And two people shooting it together, it's going to always pop very fast. Now, I don't necessarily think that this character is unbeatable, but I don't really think she has any massive weaknesses either. She's a pretty good hedge that is reasonably good against a lot of things, but isn't necessarily going to take over every single lobby. And in a lot of cases, you're just going to have to skill differ, to be honest with you. Now, without that melee tech, though, she is more vulnerable to characters that want to jump on top of her and duel her from close range. So characters like Diddy, characters like Magik, characters like Thor, Hulk, Venom, anything that wants to jump on top of her, they're all going to be good. If you could force that teleport, then she's like a victim. Now, speaking of which, Magik is really, really powerful and in the right hands can take over an entire lobby. So what are the best ways to shut down a Magik? How do you deal with a Magik? And I think similar to Mr. Fantastic, playing some reps of Magik is going to give you a better idea about when you can fight her and when you can challenge her. Because the thing about Magik is she can kind of turn the tables on anybody. If you're not ready for her, she can, you know, teleport, drop a freaking demon, and then teleport, spin dash into uppercut, and you're just dead out of nowhere. A fight that you were winning, you just lose just like that. So you have to be really careful about that, and you really want to catch her in situations where she has a little bit of a delay, because sometimes Magics are just really trying to buy time to their next cooldown, and if you can kill her during those little windows, then you could shut her down, but you got to know those windows. That's why I think playing Magik is important to be better up against her. Of course, I think the best ways to deal with her is high amounts of burst or CC or both. So crowd control is going to be great, you know, once again, Bucky, Hook, or things like that. Emma grab, freezes, anything that holds her in position is going to be really, really good, but also high amounts of burst. So if you could just do a whole bunch of damage all at once, even like a full whole like Maelstrom of Madness on Doctor Strange, she doesn't really expect to take that much damage. And sometimes when they're brawling, they expect to be able to kind of trade damage and sustain. So high burst damage out of nowhere could get them, you know, picked off when they're not quite expecting it. Also, just being careful about chasing Magik's around the corner and being careful of Magik's demon, because that's where she's going to get a ton of HP. So you don't really want to take any isolations with Magik in a very similar way that I talked about, specifically with Daredevil. The next hero is actually Starlord, and this is a character that's very similar in the positions he can take to Psylocke, can fight from multiple positions, challenge you from a lot of different positions on the map, and he has a really, really strong ultimate. So how do you deal with the Starlord? Now, the first thing is that when he spins around, things that do either persistent damage or kind of a area of damage are going to be really good at dealing damage to that Starlord. I think Luna and Luna Clap specifically is actually really good at punishing Starlord because that doesn't dodge the clap. So you can just clap him. He tries to fly away. You're just clap, clap, clap. You just kill him very easily. Characters that do kind of cleave damage, so like Mr. Fantastic, Thing can do surprising damage. Even like Scarlet Witch or Cloak and Dagger, they all just do consistent damage, so it's really hard for Starlord to kind of dodge those things. And then anything that does high burst to Starlord, because he thrives on being able to kind of predict where damage is coming from. But something like a Hela, being able to just do a massive amount of burst to him out of nowhere, is always going to be really good against the Starlord as well. Now, of course, having a plan for his ultimate is important, whether that is to focus him down with multiple players, whether it's to Magneto ult him, whether it's to like soul bond or use a defensive ult. Knowing when the ultimate's coming soon and having a plan to stop it is really important, because there's a lot of Starlords that will like pop his ult, the enemy will like pop a Luna Snow ult on one side of the map, but then he still kills someone on the other side of the map. Like, you got to be really careful about that kind of stuff and think about where you're positioned when that Starlord is close to ultimate. Now, of course, we have to mention Wolverine, a character that can take over an entire lobby. He can just farm certain tanks, especially tanks like Groot, and if you can't deal with him, he feels unstoppable. So how exactly do you stop him? Well, you want to stop him with high amounts of burst and CC. That's the main thing. So if you can deny him when he approaches your tanks, like recognize that as a DPS or a support, you are kind of in charge of Wolverine duty. If you're a Luna, trying to double up your CC with your teammates. So if your Emma grabs him or your Bucky hooks him, you also hit him with your CC afterwards. If you're Invis, saving your pull so that you could pull him off your tanks. Everyone should kind of be like, protect the president, but you're protecting your tanks and really trying to force out Wolverine, specifically his cooldown, because it creates a lot of downtime, or his overshield, which makes him vulnerable. If you're not putting in a lot of damage into your Wolverine, your tanks could just be victims the entire game, but a lot of tanks don't have a way to deny the Wolverine in the same way. So look for the Wolverine, watch where he's setting up, try to burst him when he's in open space, try to burst him when he's brawling. Don't allow him to brawl your front line, don't allow him to grab your tanks very easily. Make him play very tight and well if you want to shut him down. Now, the tanks that are the most vulnerable up against a Wolverine are tanks specifically like Groot, tanks like Strange, even Peni can have a hard time against the Wolverine. He can grab, or she can grab the Wolverine, but the Wolverine takes her out of position one time and she's dead. But characters that are okay against Wolverine are like Hulk, has ways to interact with him pretty reasonably, like outplay him a bit. Cap and Wolverine don't really interact with each other at all. Thor can just straight up win a 1v1 up against the Wolverine, and Angela is almost never in a position to get grabbed by him. Now, if you're playing a character like Hela, you know, you could take an angle where the Wolverine will never interact with you, but it's your job to stop the Wolverine, hit your stun on him, burst him down. And if your character's like Bucky or whoever else, just trying to punish this Wolverine at all costs, not allow him to roam for free, is one of the most important things that you need to do. Now, we finally have arrived at Winter Soldier Bucky, a character that does counter a lot of characters, I will say. So what exactly counters Bucky? What are the things that keep him in check? Well, for one, Bucky really thrives with the front line, and without one, he is a little lost. He doesn't have a lot of places to play cover, and he doesn't have a point of, you know, space creation that he can kind of press the enemy from. So he kind of needs to play with the front line. He's pretty bad with dive-oriented tanks. In addition to that, Bucky does struggle up against frontline tanks. So he's not that great up against Stranges, and especially up against Magneto, who can press him, zone him out, bubble his, you know, his ultimate targets, or you could even just ult the Bucky ult and stop all of his value and kill him. So as someone that plays a lot of Magneto and Bucky, Magneto is one of the hardest counters to Bucky, but you got to be very aware of his position. Look for him to be out of it, deny a lot of his hooks, and just basically focus him a ton. Also, characters that can fight him outside of his effective range, characters like Jean, characters like Hawkeye, characters like Hela are all going to be really good against Bucky because he just doesn't fight from that far away that well. Like, he can fight from like mid-range the best, but once you get to the max distances, the travel time's too far, so he's going to just be outranged there. I also think that there are situations where Bucky doesn't have enough utility to stop a dive. Like, against one Venom or one Cap, yeah, but when the enemy team is playing, you know, Daredevil, Ironfist, Venom, Cap, a solo Bucky alone is just not going to be able to stop that. He's going to hook somebody, not kill them, and then just get swarmed and murdered. So if he has an entire team of crowd control around him, it's going to be better. But you need to kind of look at their comp and be like, okay, they're just playing a Bucky. I could still play. We could play mass dive against that. But hey, they're playing Bucky, Emma, triple support, like all this nonsense. You're like, okay, we're swapping off and dive. Also, you just need to be really careful about when Bucky primes his hooks. He's going to be playing around the corner, and sometimes you walk up, you didn't even hear the activation, and the Bucky pops up and tries to hook. You got to be ready for that. It's a good idea that if you're trying to like approach chokes and you don't see the Bucky, you know they have one, to just be a little cautious, be ready on that block or ready on that movement ability, because if he grabs you, you could like walk up, grab you, and then die out of nowhere, and it can be really frustrating. Now, we saved the best for last. The top 2 meta DPS is number 1, Psylocke. And Psylocke is a very, very strong character to play and very hard to deal with in the hands of someone that really plays the character well. She has the ability to play in multiple positions, can burst out of nowhere, and has an ultimate that can wipe even through defensive ultimates. So how do you deal with a Psylocke? The first thing is know her position. Oftentimes, Psylocks are trying to set up, and if you could interrupt her setups, she typically has to disengage. So in a very similar way that we talked about a lot of dive-esque characters, if you're a mobility-heavy tank, you know, once again, someone like Thor, or, you know, even Hulk, or you're a DPS, you can find a Psylocke setting up and at the very least force her to not be in your backline. Now, that's not going to stop her by itself. Just forcing her out of your backline is going to prevent her from killing your supports, but she can still duel you and get value in other ways. And Psylocke oftentimes has the tools to win a 1v1 matchup with most squishies in the game. So you just have to be really careful about how you duel the Psylocke, understanding the limits of your mechanical skill, recognizing the Psylocke skill as well and taking it into account, and then good map knowledge and health pack knowledge can be really important. Because oftentimes if a Psylocke starts to lose a fight, she'll run away, she'll grab a health pack, she'll look for a situation to turn the tables on you. So if you don't kill her out of nowhere, she will have an opportunity to kind of deal with you after the fact. Now, it's really hard to kind of patty cake a Psylocke ult now because of how much damage it does, but if you have a mass amount of teammates with you and a lot of bodies, you can definitely stay all together and patty cake and try to survive a Psylocke ult. But in a lot of cases, you need multiple bodies together, and you need a defensive ult to stop the Psylocke ult. Although there is a small window of time after the Psylocke pops ult where you can sleep it, freeze it, exile it, whatever. That's very mechanically hard to do, though. I do think what gives Psylocke the most problems is DPS that kind of have each other's backs. Like a Psylocke that commits to the Hela and then gets shot in the back by a Bucky or a Jean. Or a Psylocke that is trying to dive somebody and then, you know, constantly has someone peeling for them. Psylocke just wants to be able to take an isolated duel, and there's going to be these windows of time where they're looking for a combo or a burst on somebody, but then they're really vulnerable to getting shot in the back. Now, the last DPS we got to talk about is Hela, the character that can get the most amount of pickoffs. And in a very similar way, if you're not playing a character that can outrange her, like Black Widow or Hawkeye, it's like you need to deal with her. She's going to get a lot of value from her positions, so forcing her to fly back to her team is really, really important. You don't have to kill her all the time, but you can't allow her to hold these really, really strong positions for too long because she eventually will get a pick on a DPS or a support. So challenging her directly is really important. Now, thankfully, you could do this on a lot of characters. You could poke her out on more frontline characters like Magneto, or fly up to her on Strange. You could jump her directly as a DPS. And you don't want to greet her too much because it's important that you don't keep chasing her and get yourself killed, because then there's no one to contest her. She's like a character that you need to constantly force out of these aggressive off angles. And if you ever push her on an off angle and she's with multiple people, you could die to nowhere. You could take like a headshot by Hela, get stunned, take another headshot, get frozen, you're dead, right? You think like, oh, I'm gonna push her. No, you're dead. So you got to be really careful and be really aware of just how isolated fighting her on that off angle is gonna be. If she's with people, it's an off angle that you can kind of poke at and push slightly, but you can't all in. If she's truly by herself, now we're talking. We can really force that bird off and get her completely out. And depending on if she made it all the way back to her team, you can't punish that, but you still got her off the angle, so you did your job. But if she doesn't go very far or she gets caught somewhere, then you can actually kill her. Now, we finally moving on to the supports, and you don't necessarily think of supports as characters that you need to counter, but let's talk about where their strengths and weaknesses are and what characters can farm them the easiest. For the first support on the list, we have Ultron, a character that is primarily going to be played in triple support, and Ultron's main strength is just mitigation and AoE healing, so he's really good at denying divers, characters like Black Panther, and characters like Spiderman, true all-in divers, and he also has the ability to mark a lot of divers or flyers, making him really strong against Human Torch, or against characters like Storm. He's really, really strong. Now, he can just be straight up shot when he's using his ultimate. Characters like Punisher ult is really good. Characters like Magneto with his ult is going to be good. And then just mass team fire up against his ultimate. It's a rather large hitbox, so multiple sources of team fire can bring the Ultron down. Anything that can ground the Ultron as well, like Bucky E or Thor grounding, can be pretty good up against him. As far as his ultimate is concerned, I think Magneto is the best up against it because the Ultron can't stop firing, meaning you're going to get a fully charged Magneto ultimate that you can use to kill pretty much anything you want to, the Ultron himself, because it's easy to hit, or you could just throw it at a random support on the ground. Now, next is Luna Snow, and Luna Snow is a character that is really good all around, but she does have some weaknesses. She doesn't have any way to really get away from a threat, so characters that jump on top of her, she needs to challenge them directly or freeze them, but multiple enemies chasing after her are going to be hard for her to deal with. This means that dive in general is going to be fairly good up against Luna, but she kind of makes up the difference with a really powerful ultimate that is good up against dive. But here's some tips up against it. First off, you want to break that overshield as quickly as possible, especially if you have some sort of combo to kill her, or like a Magneto, because it makes it really hard if you just allow her to keep her overshield. For Magneto, it's a really good idea to ult on top of her and follow her as much as you can so that you can just ult straight down, and you want to stay pretty low to the ground. And then in general, just killing through defensive ults, just kill combos, you know, Groot Moon Knight, Groot Namor, or in a case where they're being covered by a lot of shields and bubbles, just having like Magneto Pheonix is a really great combo that goes over the top of that. Now, Jeff is the next support, and Jeff can be really dominant and strong, especially enabling a dive composition, but there are some characters that he's uniquely scared of. I do think that he's very scared of Daredevil, he's very scared of Black Panther, he's scared of Ironfist, and pretty much characters that can brawl him while he's underground are going to be pretty threatening against him. And also, anything that can contest his ultimate is going to be good. So like Magneto ult, or maybe it's a Pheonix ult right on top of him, a Thor ult, even a Bucky ult combined with team pressure. If you can contest him and kill him consistently every time he ults, that's going to be a way that you mitigate his carry potential, and it's really important. Now, for Adam Warlock, this is a character that there's two main things that you need to be cautious of. Number one is his soul bond, very strong cooldown that is worth you baiting out because it's on a 40-second cooldown. And if you don't bait it out, there's a lot of things that are really hard to do. Like, it's really hard to justify ulting in his Bucky or trying to Magneto ult at all. There's a million different abilities and ultimates that could get denied by it. So until you have deliberately seen it, forced it out, and seen it being used, you just can't make a very proactive play, because you make that proactive play, he kind of counters it with that ability. But after he uses it, he's vulnerable. And there's a lot of characters that could just press him directly and force it out of him. He doesn't have any crowd control, so when he's isolated on an off angle, you could just force that out of him, and then once you get it, you just dip out, you get your cooldowns back, you get your health back, and then you re-go in with more aggressive plays. Also, if multiple fights have gone through and he hasn't ulted, he's definitely going to set up either with a res or just trying to play like an off angle and ult. Being able to press that, conserve cooldowns or ultimates to punish that, or even just be ready to kill the Atom as he's activating it, can be a really great way to stop his value. Now for Cloak and Dagger, this is a character that is very strong, building our ultimate very quickly, but Cloak and Dagger does have a lot of vulnerability. Characters like Punisher can one-pump her with his shotgun. Hawkeye can kill her just straight up with his primary, even when she's ulting or they are ulting. And Black Widow can with damage boost or with just team focus fire. You're going to be able to kill the Cloak and Dagger. Also, any amount of displacement can be good to force out that fade and make them very vulnerable. So like just booping them out with Thor, grabbing them with Emma. And I think one of the best things you could do is you see that Cloak and Dagger use their ultimate. At the very end, you pop Diamond, and instead of grabbing and kicking, you kick, run after them, then grab them so that they're being held outside of their ultimate. That could be really, really strong. And you can even do stuff like Groot ult them outside, Groot ult them to the high ground or a wall. There's a lot of different ways to pull them out, displace them out, and then kill them afterwards. Bucky Hook 180, get them out of the ultimate can be really good as well. Of course, we do have to mention Magneto ult, which I think is really, really good at just, you know, dunking on them. But you also have to be careful about popping Magneto ult when they have like Magneto bubble and other things that can protect the Cloak and Dagger. Having a plan B or a secondary option to throw your ultimate at can be really important when they get behind line of sight or get bubbled or something. So you still get value of your Magneto ult and you don't waste it. Now, I did want to mention Invisible Woman, a character that provides a ton of all-around healing, a character that can pull you out of position, and you got to be a little bit careful when you're playing on the front line, because sometimes you could be pulled a little bit further than you're expecting to, and then you just get killed out of nowhere by the Invisible Woman. Also, be very careful about being pushed off and into pits. You don't want the Invis to get multiple push-ups throughout the course of a game, because they'll just win the game off the back of that. In addition to those things, when you're playing a dive character, you have to be a little bit more cautious about when you're exiting. Exit a little bit sooner, as Venom, as Cap, whatever. Getting pulled back in can get you killed if you're not expecting it. And then characters that can take the Invisible Woman out of the ult or just combo kill her while she's in the ult are really good. You know that the entire enemy team is playing in a very small circle, so waiting till the very end of it to like hit them with a Groot ult or hit them with a Thing ult can kind of catch them off guard. They think they're safe, but you know, the ult will last past the end of the Invis ult. Also, you could just look for like a straight up combo, Groot, Moon Knight, whatever. You could use it at any time. Also, using it when like a Jeff ult, because they're all grouped up in the same area, could be really good. So those are kind of some of the things that you could think about. Another part about it is, unlike Cloak and Dagger and Luna ult, it doesn't press forward. It doesn't press forward through the fight. So if you're a DPS, you can bait it out early and then disengage, and then they can't take that ult with them, right? They just have to leave the ult or just like kind of, you know, not make any forward progress, as opposed to baiting out like a Cloak and Dagger ult in the choke. They're going to pop it and they're going to be able to push that all the way through your team. So it's not worth as much as baiting out that Invis ult is. Now, I do have to mention Mantis. Once again, a character that is going to struggle with healing amounts in 2 support compositions unless they're playing like a tank composition or a tank lineup that doesn't need a lot of heals, like solo tank Magneto, for instance. But I will say that whenever a teammate is slept, you want to shoot the after image and wake them up as quickly as possible. And then just in general, respect Mantis's output of damage. It's a character that is going to put out a crazy amount of damage, but especially with a lot of dive characters, she can be really vulnerable. So you're going to want to look to press the Mantis and not turn the fight into a poke war, because Mantis really kind of is a character that makes poke wars really hard to win, because she adds so much overall damage to the team. In a similar way, I do feel like Mantis kind of plays a little bit like, you know, the deal with or defeat characters that we talked about. Not to that quite extent, but you just can't really leave a Mantis uninterrupted or uncontested, right? They're just really gonna give so much advantages to their team if they're just allowed to just kind of vibe, take aggressive off angles, poke at your team, and just allow for so much extra bits of damage overall. Now, there are some ultimates that you can just use straight up, even in the face of a Mantis ult, like a Groot ult combined with burst damage. The Mantis ult is not going to stop that. So there's ultimates that can go completely over the top, or ultimate combos that go over the top are still going to be really, really good against Mantis. But she is a little bit hard to hit, so depending on which one it is, she is moving around pretty fast in her ultimate, and just moving around pretty fast in general, all around the fight. Now, I did want to mention Loki, a character that can be very strong depending on the situation, and he still has really powerful cooldowns, and I think baiting out his totems is really important, and pressuring out his clones is really important too. Don't allow those to just kind of persist. So if you have the means to, shoot them. Supports can do this, Lunas can do this, DPS can do this, so you want to make sure that you're spending the time to do your due diligence and dealing with these clones. I also would say that until you know that the totem is being used, trying to go all in on like a dive is going to be pretty difficult unless you have a way to get out. There are characters that are really good at baiting out totems. I think Venom's amazing at it. You can just really just dive on the Loki, force all of his cooldowns, keep chasing him. He uses totems, you disengage. Now you're good. You can just re-engage. There are also easy ways to deal with it, like Moon Knight's super good against Loki because you just get so much ricochet. Bucky gets a lot of resets off of Loki. So there are characters that are going to have better, you know, just little advantaged matchups specifically up against Loki. But last but certainly not least, we have to talk about Rocket. And Rocket is really, really strong this meta, but there's a lot of ways that you can neutralize his value, and he does get a lot of value. I think the first one is, if you're a mobility heavy character, you should be scouting and looking for his res, his BRB, because that's just as valuable as getting a kill in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of characters that could do it. I think Daredevil can go scout it out, Spiderman can find it, and Psylocke's really good at it. And if you ever have some downtime in their backline where you're setting up before you're engaging, find the res beacon and break it. It's just so much free value that the Rocket is getting that you need to deny. In addition to that, I think that everyone should be shooting at bad rocket ults, and you kind of need to identify where's like a bad rocket ult. If it's around the corner and your team have to commit in and through the enemy team to destroy it, it's going to be too hard without a defensive ult. But if it's in the open, you can put yourself in a safe position, shoot it, and then walk forward. That's just one of the most important things, and you very quickly will realize whether or not an ult is breakable or not. Like, you're calming it, you're shooting it, no one else is shooting it, you probably want to just get yourself safe, and then y'all can re-engage after the fact. Now, Rocket really is going to get the most amount of value when he can use it in order to combo with ultimates to kill through defensive ults. So if you can pressure them and force the Rocket to ult first, and then when it's about to break or like halfway broken, you could pop your defensive ults so that you can instantly use that extra bit of advantage to kill it, so that they don't have the window of time to like combo with like a Namor ult or something like that. That could be a way to stop the Rocket ult and still get a ton of value. And there's also ways that you can combo ults yourself, you know, like Luna Punisher, where you walk forward, break it really easily, and then just get to still kill the enemy team that's really strong. Now, also, while Rocket can be pretty good against dive, at the end of the day, he's like all head. So characters that can do large amounts of burst damage from range, characters like, honestly, Black Widow, Hela, and then Jean is just amazing up against him because she just does a lot of burst damage to him directly, but then also has an ultimate to break his ultimate as well. So lots of ways to deal with a Rocket, lots of ways to interact with him well, but if you don't interact with him favorably, he's going to get a lot of value. If you just kind of let him get away with bad ultimates, let him get away with the bad res stations, and just be like this unkillable threat, he's probably going to carry his team. Now, this is just some of the many ways to counter these heroes, but if you have any other tips for players on how to counter certain heroes that you've played in the past or you main, definitely share it with the community down below so we can give each other some really, really good insight on how to dominate or counter many frustrating characters in the meta. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash that like, subscribe if you did. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.